So I didn't quite get through all of them. I tried to rush at the end, but I knew I was running out of time, which is why I wasn't going to go through it. But then I chose to go through it, but now I'll go through it again. The writing process to meet the needs of every student. You'll find this on page 192, as I said before. The first stage is pre-writing. The second stage is drafting. Third stage is revising. Fourth stage is editing. Stage 5 is publishing. Now, on page 192, it actually has things that you can do under each of the stages. So you can use drawing as a rehearsal activity for a pre-writing stage, which is great, or you can use brainstorming as a technique. That's not one of the ones that are in there, but cluster diagrams are, so technically it is. Make multiple sources of topical information available. Have students talk out their compositions before beginning to write. So what are you going to write about? Tell me what you're going to write. And then write as much as you can down. Drafting, and on page 192 it gives you techniques. So what you can do as an EA in these kind of activities is you can help the students do the different stages in their writing process. So you can help in the pre-writing stage, you can help in the drafting, the revising, the editing, and the publishing. Basically, if you read this, I'm hoping it makes sense, because there's lots of places you can jump in to ask them questions or to clarify things, or just encourage them to keep going. Connections between reading and writing, you'll find this on the next page. Reading and writing are both meaning-making processes. Often they go hand in hand, so you read, you write. Reading helps with your writing, writing helps with your reading. You're interchangeable in my eyes. It's important that teachers plan literacy activities so that students can connect reading with writing. So journaling is a great activity. Story writing, creative writing, reading what the kids are interested in is also important. Figure 5-8 on page 194. So there's figure 5-8, and I didn't make a slide of it because it's in your book, so I'm not copying what you can see before you. I'm just going to talk you through it. You have your stages on the far left-hand side, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if you forget what they are, go back to page 192, and it has the stages labeled for you. It's pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. Now, if you go back to page 194, into that chart, there's a column that says what readers do, and then you just go through there and match it up with the stage. And then what do writers do in that same stage? So you can compare reading and writing at the same time in the individual stages. So I really like this chart because it's very informative, or at least I thought it was informative when I looked at it. There's classroom connections on the previous page. Teachers can help students appreciate the similarities between reading and writing in many ways. So the first way is by helping writers assume alternate points of view as potential readers. By helping readers consider the writer's purpose and viewpoint. Why do you think they did it? What's their point of view on this matter? Stuff like that. Point out that reading is much like composing. So that the students will view reading as a process, much like the writing process. So who are the characters in the book? What's the setting of the book? What's the plot of the book? Stuff like that. And so you're talking about how the writer came up with the story, and they're talking to you about the different parts of the story. So you can use both at the same time. So it's a reading activity, but it's also a writing activity at the same time, even though you're not writing. Number 4 is talk with students about the similarities between the reading and the writing process, and you can have conversations quite easily as you're going through any written material about those. Talk with students about similarities and linkages. I thought I fixed this, but I guess I didn't. Linkages between reading and writing strategies. So how are they similar? How do they link together? I often have conversations, or I used to have conversations with students about how they link their reading and writing. Other considerations in teaching reading and writing processes, you'll find this on page 193 and 195. There's the balance approach and gender differences in reading and writing. And you'll find that boys like different books than girls, and they write differently than girls. Boys tend to be more violent, and girls tend not to be. So you might have to get on them about that and give them alternate topics instead of war, fighting, guns, knives, swords, battling. It's part of the video games that they're involved in. So if you find that your students are heavily into video games and their topic matters tend to be a little bit more on the aggressive side, whereas females, when they read, it's not generally about war and violence. It's generally other topics. However, I did have one student who was big into war novels, war journals. So, but that's generally depends on the content that is being taught in the schools. Because if you read anything like Diary of Anne Frank is a good example. That book is in the elementary library at E.G. Wallstrom, and I know my students signed it out more than once. And those kind of books get very popular with teenage girls. But for some reason, they trickle down into elementary too, and I don't understand why they're fascinated with it, but I guess they are. So you have to be aware of that. A balanced approach to reading and writing. So I started at the bottom and work my way back up. It's important to consider and maintain balance when teaching students to read and write. In a balanced language arts program, teachers devote attention to each component in accordance with its importance to literacy, development, and students' needs. Our responsibility as teachers is to discern the level and intensity of instruction required for individual or small groups and modify our instruction accordingly. So that would be done for you. So you would be just stepping in to help with that modified instruction. Likewise, students learn at a different rate. And for those students, you might have to change the material for them. So give them a modified novel or modified questions or things of that nature. So you can still contribute, just differently. Let's look at a number of ways to assess children with reading and writing. It starts on page 195 and goes to page 209. There's monitoring students' progress on page 196. There's a couple ways that you can do this. You can take a baseline doing a test, and the teachers generally have some sort of reading test or writing test that they actually request that you do part ways through the year to check to see with comprehension and things of that nature. And so these tests, they'll show you how to do it, I'm hoping, or they might just give you the paper and hopefully you understand them. If you don't understand them, ask, how do you interpret this? Or they might just want you to give the test and then you don't interpret the results. It's basically up to the teacher of how they want you to do that part. But generally it's 1 or 2 pages that test, and it's relatively self-explanatory. Some it's you're listening for how they're reading, and so any miscues that they make you would document. And I would show you what that looks like. However, I don't have access to a pen on here. So that's one way that you could be assessing, is by doing a quiz or something with the student to check for certain things that the teacher has